Today we're going to look at creating a hand-colored style image from a photograph. Let's bring up an example. There we go. And there's an example of one that was done a while ago. And what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through how I created this sort of image and what steps I've done. And then we're going to combine it with the vignette that we worked at in another tutorial. And of course, that vignette gives that old world feel that we most really want in a hand colored style image. So let's just get an image to use in Photoshop. I'm going to use this horrible one that I took with an iPhone, and this is the one that I've used in the vignette tutorial as well. And we just open that one in Photoshop. And here we go. Now I'm going to work in the photography workspace because that's what I'm used to doing and I prefer that. I can flip out if I need it. So there's my image. First thing I want to do is I'm going to make the background into a layer. So right click and layer from background. There we go, layer 0. Then I'm going to duplicate the layer because I need a second copy of it. Duplicate layer, layer 0, copy. That'll do. Um, Sometimes it could be worth your while even maybe keeping the background or having a second copy and just keeping this unedited. So what I might do is duplicate the layer again, hit OK. Now I can rename these layers if I wanted to indicate what I'm going to do. Like the top one will be black and white, the middle one will have the painted look, and this one here is just going to stay. And in fact, I'm actually going to turn that one off. I've just got that there in case I make a mistake. So that's always a handy little practice. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this top layer into a monochrome image, black and white. So look, there's a number of ways to doing it. Image adjustments. Maybe the simplest way is to just desaturate, but you can use the black and white control. If you just flip to the black and white control, what it does is it gives you a whole range of options based on the effect you would have got with the old style coloured photographic filters that we used to put over camera lenses to change the relative tonal values of different colours. Infrared can be quite interesting, but in this case, red filter, I'm not going to do that, but that might be worth playing around with. I'm just going to go initially to the image adjustments and desaturate. Here we go. Now, what I can do, and I will do later on, is I might play around with the contrast and brightness, particularly when I'm blending the two colors together because I want to have a bit more control over what I'm doing. Now, I turn that one off. Here we go. This is where we need to create the undercolor, the underpainting, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to go filter, and I'm going to go to filter gallery. In a lot of the older versions of Photoshop, you would have found artistic filters and that down here, but in the current versions now, it is all here. So filter gallery. And it's got the one I want there. I've got 100% sure. The filter I'm going to use is paint daubs. There's lots of different ones here. These are all different painting style ones. You can see the different effects just by clicking on them. Underpainting, that actually might not be a bad one to try as well. Sponge. You want something that's fairly smooth, however, and allows you to play around with your brush sizes and detail to create a fairly blurry image. So you could experiment and try a few different filters if you want. We'll just go to Paint Daubs because it's the one that's in the written tutorial as well. And we want the brush size fairly large. I think in the tutorial I've said 25. It could be even, uh, you know, larger. Sharpness, we want it fairly blue. We want areas of color. See, we've got different types of brush we could use here. See, they give us different effects. And depending on what we want our final image to look like, we could use any of them. I particularly want to use the wide blurry because basically I want this image to be really just the areas of color. So I'm even going to take the brush size bigger. There we go. Let's take it in. Let's go to 50. Let's really blow it out just for this particular exercise. And I'm going to hit OK. So there's my really broadly painted set of color. Turn my black and white image back on. Now, there's a number of ways we can do this. You could play around with the opacity and just fade the black and white image so you can see the color image through it. But one of the problems with doing that is that the black and white image loses a little bit of its sharpness because the underneath image is quite blurred. If you hadn't blurred the underneath image, that might work quite nicely. But I'm going to play around with this one here, the blending modes. It's something we tend to ignore a little bit in Photoshop. So I'll drop my blending modes. And if we just hover over some of them, you can see the different results that you're getting. They're quite effective. Some obviously will work better than others, and I've got one I will look at, but I'm just going to run through these just so you can see what they look like. Now, overlay is one of the two that I like. I'm just running through. It's really quite good. You can see that. Vivid light's interesting, actually. You can get some really amazing effects when you want to play with it too. But I either like multiply or overlay. Now you can see overlay is a little bit brighter, multiply a little bit darker there. Now I'm just going to run with multiply at this stage because that's the image that we've the instructions that we've used in the tutorial. Now I could also fiddle with the opacity a bit if I wanted to. Don't have to. And I can also play around with my lightness, darkness, and whatever. I'm just going to quickly show you what happens if I turn the middle layer off. And that's with an unblurred image. That's that's nice and sharp. So that's where you might use the normal blend mode and clear it. I'm just going to go back to that and just show you. Typical of Photoshop, there are always a lot of different ways to do it. See, that can look quite nice, but it's very sharp. I'm particularly looking for the blurred look underneath, so the painting's a little bit softer. Because back in the day when this would have been hand coloured, they used photographic oil paints and they used Q-tips and brushes and so on. So they were never totally perfectly accurate, although it's amazing what they did do. It's mostly worth having a look online at some different hand-coloured photographs. So I'm just going to play around with that. So there's my image. I could play around with the colours on the background layer by checking it, and if I go to image adjustments, I might try hue and saturation. So I might want to bring my saturation up. I might want to make it lighter. That looks quite nice, doesn't it? I can change the hues. I don't want to change the hues at this point because that would change the color balance. So by playing with the lightness, you can also adjust your effect and get exactly how much coloration you want in it. But again, I'm not going to use that at present. This is an extra little bit that's not in the tutorial. Just hit cancel. I'm just going to leave it like this. It's a little bit dark, but it will work for the purposes we're doing. The other thing, of course, we could do is the lightness and darkness. I'm going to go to the top layer because that's what I'm going to play around with. Go to Image Adjustments and I go to Brightness and Contrast or Levels. Um, I'll go to Levels because it's my favorite one. I could play around with the black and white layer and seeing what I can do with that as well, just to get a different effect. It might be easier if I turned off the two color layers and just looked at my black and white photo and I did my image adjustments levels, and say I want to make it a bit more contrasty. Just bring that up here a bit. So I've got darker blacks and my whites are lighter. I just hit OK for that. Now I'll turn my background back on, and that's lightened it up a fraction and given me a little bit more of the color coming through in the light areas. So there's my hand colored image. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to put the vignette in there. Remember the vignette. So I go to my new layer. There we go. Tool. I am going to create my my marquee. So I go to my circle. Remember my feather? I've got it set here at 200 pixels from the previous tutorial. For this photo, I know that works really well. The higher the resolution of the photo, the more pixels you want for your feather. So I'm just going to go that. Okay, I can move that around. I have to get it so I select the outside. Remember that select inverse. Now I've got to have the paint bucket tool. Now in the photography workspace, as I've got it, as it's defaulted to, there is no paint bucket tool. You can add that in. There is a way of doing that and setting it up, but I haven't done it on this computer. I've done it on my laptop. I'll go to Essentials. Doesn't change anything really, just the look of what's over there. And I want my paint bucket tool. I'll go to white, so I'll flip it so my active color is white, and you can put any color there actually. Paint bucket tool, and there we go. I'll hit Command D to get rid of my marching ants, and there's my image, hand colored style with fading to white background. So you can play around with that. Try some of the different options that I mentioned. You'll get slightly different effects with all of them, and you can create quite a nice looking hand coloured style image that harks back to days of yesteryear.